think that it's individual, and that's our responsibility to figure out what that is. That's why I always ask their why. Why do you want to improve your health? Why do you want to lose weight? What is that burning desire? Do you want to be able to get down on the floor and play with your grandchildren? Do you want to live another day? Are you worried you're going to die early? You really have to get at that why and how they're feeling if they don't change. And so that's always my next question.
First of all, the obesity epidemic actually made its appearance very dramatically in the late 1970s. As a child of the 50s, I never saw it, but it's true in the late 1970s, and it continues unabated. Now, what went wrong? It's multifactorial, it's very complex, but the foundation is a combination of genetics and epigenetic and environmental changes. So genetics, environmental changes, and epigenetic changes, they go hand in hand, resulting in, much to Angie's point, is biohormonal disruptions. Now
that's in-person events, but we also want to let folks know that we know that the world is changing and that the opportunity to earn your continuing education is not only at in-person events. So we also want to make note of virtual conferences that we have taking place next year. And we have 3 opportunities for folks to join us for live virtual conferences next year. And those are taking place on February 21st next year, where we'll have a one-day program where all of the educational components to these events are still being planned. So certainly keep an eye on the website for more details there. But February 21st, we will also be hosting a 2-day virtual event, June 6th and 7th next year. And then once again, September 19th and 20th next year. So 3 opportunities to join us for virtual conferences. How can a patient prepare to come into a visit with their healthcare provider and have it be the best sort of experience for the patient? Is there anything that you can think of that they could do that they can get the most out of that 15 or 30-minute visit that they have when they come into the office and are able to meet with the provider that they're with?
Let me start with that, because every 1 to 2 years, I post my recommendations for optimizing a visit with your healthcare provider on social media. I also on our practice social media as well, because there are a few things that I really believe can really make a visit much more effective. First, patients need to arrive on time. And if they're new, or if there's going to be paperwork to fill out, don't come right at the hour when you're scheduled for your appointment. Come 10 or 15 minutes early. Why? So we can get your paperwork done. And 2, so we can let you sit. So before we get you into the exam room, you have a minute to sit so your blood pressure is not skyrocketing because you were driving 90 miles to get to your appointment. So plan and leave early. Come in with a list and prioritize that list of the 4 or 5 things that you want to make sure. That's how I start every visit. Tell me what's new and what I need to know about that you want me to address every single visit. And so have that list available. Now, we may not be able to get through all of them, but we can at least pick away at many of them and set up a plan to continue to chip away. But don't be afraid to say, I am worried about X, Y, and Z, or I have a question for you.
There are thousands of genes we could be testing. And this is where the slippery slope argument happens. When you're looking for high quality evidence to decide, 1, whether to do it, and if so, yes, which genes you should be paying attention to, that's where CPIC comes in. That's where the FDA has actually rendered some opinions to say these are the short list genes that you should test, because we have enough evidence 2 decades on to say if you make clinical decisions based upon these genotypes and phenotypes, the clinical outcomes do change. They improve if you actually guide your care based upon genomic decisions on this short list of well-researched genes. Not just everything. These are the ones that show us evidence for efficacy and clinical utility. So if you're following the clinical consortiums like CPIC or the FDA's group on genetic testing, you can't go wrong. I mean, certainly it's not FDA approved yet, but at least the FDA has said these are places where we know genetics weighs in on how these medicines work and how they're metabolized. So, dear clinician, pay attention to that. It can change the outcome and the tolerability, if nothing else. So we're darn close, especially with genomics.
So proud of our Freight Farms initiative, and I think it is probably the program that we have where all of our kind of values and goals for our kids really coalesce. So long story short, the Freight Farm for us is it's a hydroponic container garden. Realistically, we're about to bring our third one online, and so what this allows us to do is to grow organic produce 365, really cost effectively, to be able to utilize both in our in-house kids cafe daily meals program, but also to share it more broadly with a network of about a dozen food pantries and other hunger relief agencies throughout sort of the Metro South region here. And so it's, one prong of it is that it's providing that healthy food. And I think, we know that nutritional assistance is sort of the bedrock upon which all of our other programs are successful. It's great to have college access programs. It's great to have character and leadership programs. But when you're 8 and you don't know what you're eating for dinner, it's really hard to have those aspirational goals and think about a plan for tomorrow.
We have 3 big goals next year. And I think the biggest ones are, what is the purpose of NPACE and the education that we're doing? The second one is engagement, and that's how we learn from our audience and the folks that we interact with about what their needs are. And the last is the healthcare landscape and some of the things that we see on the horizon as we enter this year.
Well, good morning, Josh and Terry. I'm so delighted to join you here and to have this really important conversation, because I do believe, as cheesy as it sounds, that the children are our future. So it's really important for us to talk about this. And when you ask me what's the hardest thing that I'm seeing in practice, it's honestly very difficult to choose, because there are a lot of hard things that are facing families today. But by far and away, I know from my own personal practice, and I know from surveying pediatric nurse practitioners and advanced practice nurses from across the country, that the number one thing that we're seeing is concern over mental health. And often I'm asked in the media, is it as bad as people are saying it is? And I'm a nurse, so it's important for me to give a trustworthy answer. And I say, no, it's worse. It's infinitely worse. And I think we're just seeing a perfect storm of things. We're seeing Gen Z, which is a digitally connected generation, but they have really not been connected relationally. So we're seeing things like order anxiety, which is a term they use for their fear of even going up to the counter in a coffee shop and giving their order in person. And then we had COVID come in, which really amplified that digital connection, and it really continued to cut them off from real people in the world. And so they're feeling anxious, they're living at the speed of a smartphone. And in our last survey at the National Association of Pediatric Nurse Practitioners, we saw that 90% of respondents, this was over 1,000 respondents, said by far and away we are seeing the mental health crisis, not only among children, but among their parents in practice. And that is very difficult, because it's hard to refer. Even if you do want to refer, can they afford it? Is there someone who can see them? There are all these barriers to care. So we are really trying, as pediatric focused advanced practice nurses, to learn how to deliver more mental health in primary care.
Things you need to do when you don't want to do them. That's what success is, because you can parlay that into your career. You can parlay that in your career in every way, shape, or form. In order to get where you want to go, you're going to have to make sacrifices. Sacrifices to time, money, sleep, time with your family, doesn't matter. Your accolades don't come without sacrifice. Your career doesn't come without sacrifice. So does your health. Your health is not going to come without sacrifice. So it's why, like, I used to just talk about nursing, but I talk about the physical aspect of it, because it mirrors it in every way. Like,
I agree. And if we're talking about how we're going to cope and keep people from burning out, yeah, I hate those morning workouts. I never go into a workout going, hooray, but I never leave one regretting that I'd done it.
but that's the science behind it, is that,
Yeah.
the endorphins and all that other stuff. But
It helps me cope with my day.
yeah,
It
it's just, you
does.
have to create a routine, and you don't have to do what you do or I do. You do something that you enjoy. You do something that you don't have to convince yourself to do. I don't think there's a difference when it comes to the educational program itself. It comes down to the learner, as in the student. You know, do they learn better face to face, real time, or are they okay with segmented, at your own pace kind of learning? So, how are students doing these days? I don't think anything's changed. I think they all still say the same things. They all still feel very unprepared. They all still have horrible imposter syndrome. They all still are amazed at how much they have to know. That they're scared out of their minds because most nurse practitioners, they usually parlay into an area that they're comfortable with.